next guest we have to talk to is Jonathan Sanglerat, who is a civil engineer with the city of Petaluma. And he was the operations oversight person for the dredging operations. And we're going to be focusing in this discussion on a little bit of the environmental science, but mostly the engineering aspects of the current operations and a little bit about the future operations. So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about what you do for the city, and then we'll get right into the dredging part.
Thank you, John. So I'm an associate engineer with the city of Petaluma. I work in the capital improvements program. So we mainly do all the public works city projects. So I work a lot on the airport, transit center. I've done a lot of the projects that are near the water. So that's why I was working with the U.S. Army Corps for the dredging that just finished, and a lot of the utility projects as well.
Thank you. Can you describe for us what was done to prepare for this dredging project?
So like I mentioned before, this dredging project was actually all performed by the U.S. Army Corps. The city of Petaluma's role in this project was as the project sponsor. And so we helped coordinate with the Army Corps and work with them to make sure it was a successful project. One of the things that they did to prepare for the dredging was perform hydrographic surveying of the river, which helped them by getting river depth data for their construction plans.
And then just from the studies of the depth, about how deep was the river to start with, and then what did we finish up with?
So the river had a big range of what the depths were. So the design depth of the river was -8 mean lower low water, which was the datum. And some areas were deeper than that, mainly more southern, closer to the river mouth, with the exception of the river mouth, which was very sediment heavy. But it got as shallow as -1. And so they took out upwards of 7 feet of material in some of the areas. Since the river maintains a certain level of dissolved oxygen, if we were discharging from the site too quickly, we'd be essentially suffocating the fish if the dissolved oxygen was too low. And so what we had to do was put in these commercial pond aerators to increase the dissolved oxygen before the water was discharged.
Good. And did they get to a widening and making it deeper than normally, or was it pretty much just brought back to what it was in the past?
So the federal channel is a defined 100-foot long width, and it is more towards the center of the river, and they basically just return that section to the design depth.
If a yacht comes up the river, how much depth can they expect to see all the way up, coming up to our basin?
About 8 feet.
8 feet. So it's at least 8 feet of depth. So that's correct. All. You have to have at least a less than 8 foot draft in order to make it up the river.
Yeah, and that's, it's a tidal datum, so that depends on the tides as well. If you're going to go during low tide, it might not be 8 feet.
So when someone comes in with their boat and they want to come up to the basin and dine with us, what type of depth can they expect from the river all the way up?
They can expect 8 feet just from the recent dredging event. The river was dredged by Pacific Dredge and Construction, a dredging contractor, and they used a hydraulic suction dredging equipment. The dredging barge they use is commercially known as a sandpiper. And the sandpiper has this boom arm with a cutting head attachment that allows it to make precise cuts in the river soils. And the soils are then pumped through a continuous floating piping system, and they were deposited at Schollenberger Park.
Was there anything special? Because I heard there was some sort of, there was batteries and electricity was used, and because it wasn't that loud, it wasn't like large diesel engines that we heard. It was a fairly quiet operation, wasn't it?
So they had a second barge that was hooked up to their primary barge. The reasoning for that wasn't necessarily the type of fuel. It was because otherwise they would have to get a barge that was too big for the river width. And so they had a generator and system on the other barge to power their sandpiper. There was a lot of issues with garbage that they encountered during the dredging. Primarily, the area where a lot of the material they found was just south of D Street Bridge, and then heading into the turning basin underneath the D Street Bridge. It seemed like a lot of stuff got washed down into that area or dumped in that area. In particular, some of the weird things that they found were bowling balls, and the unfortunate thing about those is they were about the same size as the the area of the pipe that was sucking up the material, so they would clog it very tightly, and so they had to stop operations sometimes to chip the bowling balls out. And bowling balls are pretty hard. They also found a lot of shopping carts, car parts, logs. A lot of logs were in the river. Some maybe old timber piles or um, but just a lot of debris. And that was mainly, like I said, just south of the D Street Bridge was the one of the primarily worst areas.
Okay, and I noticed on the dredge spoils area, a lot of the trash that we did clean up. I mean, we pulled out many truckloads over many days with a large group of volunteers who went out and cleaned that all up. And so what's going to happen to all that 200,000 cubic yards now have been put into Schellenberger Park? Will it stay there, or is it going to get trucked out or put somewhere?
So for the time being, it will need to stay there until the water evaporates or decants out through the weirs. And once that the material is dry enough, the cities will make plans to remove it to, if it's sufficient. Uh, if there's areas where the soil is not contaminated by trash, we may be able to use it for beneficial reuse. I know that sometimes dredge spoils are also used as landfill cover. Um, so at the time that the water decants out, the city will make plans to remove the material for future dredging event volume.
Good. And there's like some beneficial uses, so we might be able to get some excellent use out of it, or even sell it to folks for as landfill.
Correct.
Okay, good. So what do you consider to be the most successful part of this whole project?
I would say the overall project was very successful because we were able to return the river in the federal channel to its original design depth, meet the project schedule, and to my knowledge, there was no significant environmental impacts that arose during the dredging. And so I would say that's pretty successful.
Good. And with the dredging that's now done, so we'll talk about the flooding and how did it help reduce our flooding? Is there, because a lot of folks are concerned about that, especially down in the downtown area and upriver from there. So what's the impact of dredging on flooding?
So since this wasn't a city project, we didn't do an analysis on the flooding impact, but I know that we have other projects in the city that are ongoing to reduce flooding. I know one just finished, which was Denman Phase 4, where we cleared a lot of area to allow for larger surges in flooding, to try and keep it out of commercial and residential areas. And for future dredging events, that will probably be something the city looks at to see how it impacts any sort of flooding.
Okay, good. And so what's our next step in the future for both the marina, and then when are we going to dredge next?
So as far as the river goes, that's a good question. We haven't made any plans as of yet, but we have obtained 10-year maintenance permits that allow the city to dredge from the marina mouth all the way up to the turning basin, as well as dredge the marina. And so the next project that the city is looking to do is the dredging of the marina, and that's anticipated to happen in 2021.
We do know that we're going to have the personal responsibility for it, that the Army Corps is not going to come in, and that we've got to start working up on a regional level to develop a plan with other cities we have the same situation we do, Sonoma, Napa, maybe down on the peninsula down south in Marin County. There's several towns that may need dredging that's ongoing, and we're all facing the same situation. So I'm hoping that we can come up with a regional solution and have either with contracting or owning dredge companies are bringing up closer and then coming together and just organizing it ourselves. But at least that's what we know we need to do. We know to keep this river red dredged in the future. And what do you see as some of the any other benefits that you've personally seen already from dredging?
Well, just the excitement from having boats be able to come. So, I was in contact with a lot of residents and people outside the city of Petaluma who were interested in bringing boats up to come visit. I know during this time for COVID, it makes it harder, but the once COVID starts winding down, it will hopefully help to revitalize our downtown by having people come up from other areas to visit the local restaurants and area.
Good. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our discussion?
I don't think so. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today. We've had a lot of information we were able to share out, and hopefully it'll all be part of our presentations that we'll be doing on our website here at Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.